Dallas. This is the team that continues to really confuse me as far as how they really look at approaching free agency.
Here is my message to you, Micah. Get used to it. If you are sitting there saying, well, why are all these other teams signing all these other really good players? The answer is your team doesn't do that. It has cost them, and it will continue to.
I feel like I make a video like this each and every single year where I admit to all of you guys, despite being a huge fan of the Dallas Cowboys, I unfortunately don't have any idea what this team is planning on doing. None of their roster decisions really make a lot of sense so far. We're gonna break down everything they've done so far because they haven't stood pat, and it's not necessarily the most exciting offseason. There's some moves that I really like, but there's one move in particular that is a clear indicator that the Dallas Cowboys have no freaking idea what they're doing. So before we get to the content, we dropped our second baseball video on Uni Diamond Talk. We announced some giveaway winners for copies of MLB The Show 25. We're still giving away copies of MLB The Show 25. All you have to do to enter is subscribe and turn on your notifications on that channel. Now that we get all that out of the way, today's video is sponsored by PrizePicks. We've been having a dominant run making easy money on our NBA props that I give away on my Instagram at @TheFlightMike and on my Patreon at Mikerophone. Make sure you use my promo code Mikerophone to get $50 when you make a play of $5 or more, or just click in the link in the description down below. And thank you, PrizePicks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? I've preached on this channel many times that if a team wants to win a Super Bowl or experience sustained success, they need to make sure that they manage the salary cap well. Their team needs to be a blend of players outperforming their undervalued contracts or players on rookie scale contracts that are absolutely dominant. A good indicator of this is take a look at the previous Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. I mentioned this a lot of times. Just a few seasons into Jalen Hurts' career, the moment he was eligible for a contract extension 2 years ago, the Eagles wasted no time and signed him to the max contract that a quarterback could earn. Although that contract wasn't going to affect the team's salary cap until a year later, they still got him for a relatively cheap value considering how much a quarterback is right now. Jalen Hurts gets paid about $53 million a year. When you compare that to Dak Prescott, who's getting paid $60 million a year, there's just no comparison. And the Eagles have had a track record of doing things like this. Last offseason, they were the first team to extend their wide receiver. They paid Devontae Smith a contract paying him $25 million a year, and then quickly paid AJ Brown a contract extension that pays him $30 million a year. By doing this, they were able to save up enough money to sign Saquon Barkley with the money that they ended up saving. If they waited too long to sign Jalen Hurts, then they would have had to pay him something about $56 or $57 million a year, and they would have had to pay AJ Brown something like $34 million a year. Then they wouldn't have been able to afford Saquon Barkley. But on top of that, the Eagles have always taken calculated risks, whether it was drafting a player that had off the field issues in the form of Jalen Carter, who is clearly the best defensive player in his draft class and it wasn't even close, or taking risks on reclamation projects like Mekhi Becton. And ironically, they recently did the same thing when they traded Chauncey Gardner-Johnson for Kenyon Green, presumably to fill the void that Mekhi Becton left behind, which I mistook for Cam Jurgens in my previous video covering the trade, and for that I apologize. Whenever you have a team that's consistently making intelligent salary decisions, there's no question that they're eventually going to make it to the Super Bowl or win a Super Bowl, and that's what the Philadelphia Eagles did, and they're continuing to do it. And when you compare that to their division rival, the Dallas Cowboys, they always do the exact opposite. Last offseason, the Dallas Cowboys waited until the last possible moment to extend CeeDee Lamb. If they paid CeeDee Lamb right before AJ Brown got a contract extension, they would have probably had to pay him something around $30 to $31 million a year, but they waited too long and ended up paying him just a little bit underneath Justin Jefferson's contract, which was $34 million a year. The Cincinnati Bengals are currently paying for the same thing, by the way. They could have signed Jamar Chase to a contract extension last year, but they waited too long, and now, after Jamar Chase's career season, they need to beat Justin Jefferson's number. But that's not the only mistake the Cowboys made. They decided to pay Dak Prescott $60 million a year, a number that's so inflated that when Josh Allen agreed to a contract extension with the Buffalo Bills, he took $5 million less, got got paid $55 million a year. So this goes to show how the Cowboys really don't know what they're doing, and it gets way worse here. The moment the offseason began, Cowboys fans were met with some gut-wrenching news. One of their best players in franchise history, Zach Martin, announced that he was going to retire. But unlike last season, where they said they were all in, the Cowboys decided to hit the ground running on trying to pick up some new pieces. And these pieces aren't anything too crazy. It's a bunch of prove-it deals. For instance, they signed Robert Jones to fill in the void that Zach Martin would leave behind. Robert Jones has been a below-average offensive tackle for his entire career. They signed him to a one-year, $4.75 million deal. They also signed Peyton Turner, who's an edge rusher, to a one-year prove-it deal for $3 million. Peyton Turner was actually very solid this past year, and this could be one of those undervalued contracts that pays off for the Cowboys. Although he was terrible against the run, he was very good at getting after the quarterback and generating pressures. He forced 2 fumbles, got 2 sacks, and 11 solo tackles, and 13 pressures in this past year. They also signed former NFL draft bust and journeyman Solomon Thomas to a 2-year, $8 million deal. Solomon Thomas has always been an average edge rusher. He's currently 29 years old. Before they announced that they were finally addressing the running back position, signing Javonte Williams to a contract. In the earlier parts of his career, Javonte Williams was an incredible running back with a tremendous amount of potential. The problem was that he suffered a freak injury during his second season in the NFL, tearing his ACL, LCL, and posterior lateral corner. And once he returned, he wasn't the same running back again. In his rookie season, he was averaging 4.4 yards per carry, and he was a huge factor in the passing game as well, getting 316 receiving yards as well. But once he returned from that injury, his numbers dwindled to 3.6 yards per carry, but he was still a huge factor in the passing game. So at the very minimum, Javonte Williams could be an incredible receiver on passing downs. None of these are necessarily huge splashes, as the Cowboys haven't made a gigantic free agency acquisition since they signed Greg Hardy 10 years ago. And at this point, if I'm the Dallas Cowboys, I would want to make a huge free agent acquisition just so we don't have to keep remembering the fact that this team took a flyer on one of the worst human beings in NFL history. They finally decided to sign former Chicago Bears linebacker Jack Sanborn, which I think is probably their most underrated acquisition. Jack Sanborn was great at getting after the quarterback. He was amazing in run defense. He was terrible in coverage. He's only 24 years old, and this could once again be one of those prove-it deals that pays off for the Cowboys mightily. So with all this being said, why are analysts saying things like this?
Another loss by the Cowboys.
I'm convinced the Cowboys just don't
in that
care.
mode?
Yeah, Cowboys just like, hey man, it is what it is, dog.
They feel like a guy like Peyton Turner, who they signed as a free agent, like we'll just slap him in there. They just look at that, like they're looking at him and Solomon Thomas, and they just sign guys like they're just like, hey, you know what? They'll just out effort them and we'll out hustle them.
Yeah, all right.
I mean,
You see, the Cowboys have made some good moves. The number one move I wanted to make sure that they made was keep Kevontae Turpin no matter what. And it seems like they were able to do that as well. The issue with the Cowboys isn't the fact that they're making these small moves, because I'm actually a huge fan of some of the moves they're making. I love the fact that they went ahead and traded a 5th round pick and a 2026 7th round pick to the Buffalo Bills for Kaiir Elam and a 2025 6th round pick. I know Bills fans are going to say, but Mike, Kaiir Elam is the sole reason we were not able to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. But the thing is, Kaiir Elam was incredible throughout the regular season. I mean, he was incredible against the run. He was above average in coverage. He was dominant in cornerback blitzes. If you just take a look at his PFF grades, this man was awesome whenever it came to playing his position. The reason why the Bills traded him is because they probably wouldn't be able to afford to extend him, and also because he did get exposed against the Kansas City Chiefs. So obviously that's a factor. I'm not mad at the Cowboys for losing Rico Dowdle to the Carolina Panthers. As a matter of fact, I'm happy for Rico Dowdle for getting a contract from the Carolina Panthers. I even think the trade for Kenneth Murray was brilliant. These are all small, sneaky acquisitions that could fill in tiny holes for the Dallas Cowboys this season. The thing that bothers me that the Cowboys did this offseason is the fact that they decided to kick the can down the road once again, showing that they just don't know what they're doing when it comes to managing their salary cap. You see, Dak Prescott got paid a huge contract extension last year, mainly because the Cowboys didn't have a choice. They backloaded his contract so much that they had no choice but to extend Dak. And they decided to enter this offseason by restructuring Dak Prescott's deal and also restructuring CeeDee Lamb's deal. Now, for those of you guys that don't know what restructuring means, it's when a team converts a portion of a player's base salary into a signing bonus and then spreads that money, which is now part of the signing bonus, over the remaining years of the contract, creating immediate cap space relief, but also increases future cap hits. This is why people say the salary cap isn't real, but it's very real. You're just kicking the can down the road even further, which means in the future, the Cowboys are going to have some issues trying to sign additional players so they could be competitive. And I assumed that the reason the Cowboys decided to make this decision was because they wanted to extend Micah Parsons. Dallas restructured both Dak Prescott's and CeeDee Lamb's contracts, freeing up $56 million to spend this offseason. This is money that will count against the cap over the next 4 seasons. The whole point of restructuring is to use the cap space you've created. Otherwise, it's a complete waste. If you don't spend it, then all you've done is push that money into the future, where it still has to be paid. By the way, I don't know who wrote this article originally. If anyone knows, let me know in the comment section. But this article says they signed absolutely nobody, and relatively, it is kind of true. I mean, when you sign players to 1-year prove-it contracts, it doesn't really diminish your cap space. But this article is right when it says that they crippled their future. They're about to enter week 1 with $50 million unspent, and it's a huge problem. If the Cowboys are saving up this cap space in order to extend Micah Parsons, then obviously it's a great move. If the Dallas Cowboys were saving up this cap space so they could bring back Tank Lawrence, then obviously it's a great move. But they let Demarcus Lawrence leave to the Seattle Seahawks on a 3-year, $42 million max deal with $18 million guaranteed.
We lost the Seahawks. No.
Excuse me?
Wait, what?
He's gone. D-Law traded is sick. I gotta hit my mans up.
Now, upon signing with the Seattle Seahawks, former 4-time Pro Bowler Demarcus Lawrence had this to say about his time with the Dallas Cowboys.
Returning to Dallas, did it ever feel like that was in play?
The situation in Dallas, I mean, everything really happened so fast. When the offers came across the table in Dallas, the offer wasn't there. I had a decision to make, and that's what happened.
You know, Dallas is my home. I made my home there. You know, my family lives there. You know, I'm forever going to be there. But, you know, I know for sure I'm not going to win a Super Bowl there. So, yeah. We here.
We're here. Demarcus Lawrence, welcome to the Seahawks. Thanks for joining us.
And Micah Parsons obviously took objection to this, quote tweeting this and saying, "This is what rejection and envy look like. This is some clown shit." Demarcus Lawrence responded to this saying, "Calling me a clown won't change the fact that I told the truth. Maybe if you spent less time tweeting and more time winning, I wouldn't have left." And I personally find this particular tweet to be really funny because the last time the Cowboys were really successful was during the 2023 season, where they were the number 2 seed versus the Green Bay Packers in the wild card. If they beat the Green Bay Packers, they could have potentially had home field advantage for the entire playoffs. But according to Demarcus Lawrence, there was something that got in the Cowboys' way.
What happened and why your team isn't here?
All honesty, I think the main thing is we was burned out, man.
So we didn't win a Super Bowl because Demarcus Lawrence was too tired when it came for playoff time. Jokes aside, I have a lot of appreciation for what Demarcus Lawrence did for the Cowboys. But with all due respect, thinking that you're going to go to one of the most competitive divisions in the NFC and you're going to win a Super Bowl in that division is absolutely insane. Don't get me wrong, the Seattle Seahawks definitely have the talent to potentially shock a lot of teams. There's a reason why they traded DK Metcalf and Geno Smith and brought in Sam Darnold. They're really trying to do everything they possibly can to make this team's defense their identity. And for all you know, it could potentially work. But I'm not going to knock the fact that the Seattle Seahawks could potentially surprise a lot of teams this year, because if the Washington Commanders could go from the number 2 pick in the 2024 NFL Draft all the way to the NFC Championship, then honestly anything is possible, especially if your franchise is making intelligent decisions. I just find it very ironic that the individual that said he was too tired to be competitive in the wild card is all of a sudden so hungry for a Super Bowl. Now, what's kind of nice about this is the rest of the Dallas Cowboys defense seems to have taken this personally. I mean, Osa Odigizua said bury the dead and feed the living. Marvion Overshone said Cowboys versus everybody. Sam Williams said hashtag my turn. I mean, reading these tweets gets you really amped up as a Dallas Cowboy fan, although 2 of these players are quite literally the NFL equivalent to Joel Embiid. I personally love the Cowboys contract for Osa Odigizua. It was a 4-year, $80 million contract contract, but really it's a 2-year, $39 million deal with team options on the back end. The tag was $25.1 million, which means the Cowboys have 3 years of control for $13.9 million guaranteed. So clearly that wasn't their strategy. They've allowed Jordan Lewis to walk and Chauncey Golston to leave for next to nothing. They've also passed on signing high impact players at bargain prices to address key needs before the draft. Players like Dre Greenlaw, Charvarius Ward, Byron Murphy, Carlton Davis, DJ Reed, Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, Poona Ford, Robert Spillane, Grady Jarrett, and many more. So you would assume that the Cowboys are trying to sign Cooper Kupp or Asante Samuel Jr. or, again, extend Micah Parsons, because if not, then you're just kicking the can further down the road for no reason. I honestly would have rather taken the cap hit, because if we're being realistic here, the Cowboys don't have a chance this year. I'm speaking objectively. I am a huge fan of the Dallas Cowboys. Unfortunately, I have no choice. I was born in Dallas, Texas, moved to Los Angeles at the age of 10. The Rams weren't around at that point, but the Lakers were, so that explains why I'm a Laker fan and a Cowboy fan, for those of you guys wondering. And also, I just can't root for the Mavericks after the dumb shit they just did recently. We covered that on my Flight Mike basketball channel. But it's like the Cowboys are getting memed at this point for the fact that they're not even spending any money in free agency. I like the fact that they're being selectively aggressive, and even RJ Ochoa is praising the Solomon Thomas move.
I love this move. It was Osa Odigizua and Mozzie Smith. You needed a stable veteran. I like deferring to one of your new staffers and saying, who do you like?
But there's so many holes on this roster, and then you're in the same exact division as the Washington Commanders, who made it to the NFC Championship and then got even better in the offseason, and the Philadelphia Eagles, who are consistently being aggressive and making the right moves. I mean, don't get me wrong, not every move that the Eagles make pans out, but at least they make sense. And I think that's the thing that frustrates me the most about being a fan of this team. I don't mind if we're not competitive if I see a light at the end of the tunnel. Like the Chicago Bears a few years ago when they traded Khalil Mack for next to nothing and things were looking very bleak. We knew that in a few years' time they were going to have plenty of cap space to spend in free agency. We knew what they were doing. But in this case, I don't know what the Cowboys are doing. It seems like they're doing everything they possibly can just so they could scrap together a barely competitive team that is destined to go 9-8 or 8-9 and miss out on the playoffs. They're the third best team in the NFC East if we're lucky. So I really don't know what the strategy and the game plan is at this point. So let me know in the comment section down below if you're a Cowboy fan. How do you feel about this offseason so far? Maybe you can make sense out of it, because I certainly can't. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.